Hey guys, so this video I'm just going to give sort of my unfiltered thoughts about this topic, which is how to practice effectively for speed cubing improvement. And the reason I'd like to talk about this is actually for two reasons. First of all, because I see a lot of people plateauing and they don't really know how to improve. And second, because even though it's a cliche kind of topic, everyone knows that they should practice, I think it definitely needs to be talked about more in detail. So just to start off, I think the two aspects that go into effective practice are quality and quantity. Everyone knows about the quantity. As I mentioned, whenever anyone asks how to improve, we tell them do a ton of solves, hundreds of solves per day, every single day, and then you're bound to improve. While that's true to a certain extent, eventually you're still going to plateau, and that's where the quality aspect comes in. So for quality of practice, this is basically what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the video. So it's important to stay consistent and intensely focused throughout your practice sessions. So minimizing distractions, whether that be Facebook or your phone ringing or any other distractions that you can have while you're solving, all these interruptions add up and take away from your focus onto your solves. Furthermore, you need to be focused on improving your weaknesses. So instead of just mindlessly solving over and over again, you need to identify the parts of your solve and the aspects that you think need working on. And you don't even necessarily have to do, say your last layer is your weakness, you don't necessarily have to do last layer only, but just if you focus your mind and get into that mentality of thinking that you need to focus on your last layer and that's what you're trying to improve, I think that really goes a long way, because once you're actually thinking about it, then you're more likely to pay more close attention to it while you're solving. Moving on forward into kind of how to get into the practice session. So a lot of people, when they start a practice session, including myself, we're not really warmed up. The first, I guess, 12, 15, 20, maybe sometimes even 50 solves are a lot slower than what I usually average. So how I deal with this and how I recommend that you guys kind of warm up to solve, especially if you haven't done a session in a couple days, is to gradually increase speed to build up your coordination. I find, especially with 3x3, there's a lot of coordination required. You have to use both your hands at the same time to alternate the moves, and that requires a lot of coordination. So for myself, I like to slowly build up by doing slow turning solves at the beginning, trying to focus on my hands and making sure I'm doing the turns properly. Then as my coordination builds up, I will slowly increase the TPS. That's something that I've started doing recently, and I found that it's helped. The other tip that I think isn't talked about enough is doing multiple sessions per day. So this also plays back into the focus aspect. There's only a certain amount of time where you can kind of stay focused on one event or cubing in general. Say if I do a one-handed session, I can only really focus perfectly on those solves and stay focused and get my good times for maybe 200 to 300 solves. And since I'm doing like competition simulations, that ends up being a period of a couple hours at most, maybe more solves with 300, 400, something like that. But after that point, I find that my times generally decrease, I lose my focus, and I get tired. So a way to combat this is to do multiple sessions per day. So say in the morning you want to do one big session, then you want to do one halfway through the day, maybe in the afternoon, 3 p.m., and then another one late at night, maybe 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, past midnight. And I find this is good for two reasons. First of all, it allows you to increase the quantity of the solves that you're getting in. So instead of just doing one big session every day, if you do three, obviously you're getting a lot more solves in. That's the obvious aspect. But the other part to this is that it gets you adapted to different environments. So you'll get used to solving in the morning, which is when you're most likely most energetic. Halfway through the day, maybe you've had some food. There's just a lot of variability in there. And then obviously at night, you'll be a lot more tired. So that'll further simulate maybe the end of a competition, and that's one way to get yourself adapted, and also to force your mind to kind of be used to solving cubes in different states of fatigue, satiation, other aspects. And one of the last things I'd like to mention that I think isn't talked about much is imagination and visualization. So what I mean by this is kind of reinforcing good habits and things that you want to implement in your solves without actually having a cube. So say right before a solve, this would be the obvious example. Right before a solve, you're thinking, okay, when I go through this, I have my whole first block planned. I'm imagining what I'm about to do, and then you're more likely to do it right. I think that's a technique a lot of people use. But the other side to that is just like practicing without a cube. And this might sound crazy, but one thing I've started doing is, since I'm learning edge commutators for 3-blind, sometimes if I'm watching TV and it's in the commercial break and I don't have a cube with me, what I'll do is just sit there and drill like a whole set of algs in my head. So I'll imagine my hands and a cube in my hands, and I'll say, okay, UF, UR, LF, so that I can immediately see how I'm going to do that, and I can see my hands doing the right finger tricks, I can see the pieces cycling, perfect, I can do it fast in my head, so that I'm more likely to remember that alg and know it for next time. Also, another thing can just be visualizing through like 3x3 or one-handed, anything like that. A couple summers ago when I was doing a lot of solving, basically I'd do plenty hours a day, I'd just a lot of hours. I was basically going crazy because of how many solves I was doing. I used to like visualize before I was falling asleep of myself doing a session on CS Timer. Like I was generating scrambles in my head, and I could basically see different unique scrambles, and then I ended up even dreaming about cubing, and then I could practice that way and see myself like solving and learning new things. I think I actually found a new way to build first blocks while in a dream, which was pretty crazy. Now, you don't really need to go that hardcore with it, but just that type of thing with visualizing algs, visualizing solving, I think could be really beneficial. And the last kind of thing I'd like to mention is that you should never be like satisfied with where you are. You should always be setting further goals to stay determined and motivate you to practice more. And right before I end this video, the last thing I'd like to talk about is kind of going back into that motivation aspect. Make a friend or a rival, I guess. I don't want to encourage rivalries, but I think if you're really stuck, having kind of a friendly competition with someone can help. I know for myself, I only start to practice certain events when certain people start surpassing me in them. So maybe for you, having someone who's close to your speed or slightly faster would help to keep each other motivated and keep yourself motivated. So hopefully there was some value in some of the things I mentioned in this video, and hopefully some of the things about focus, quality of practice, targeting your practice towards your weaknesses, imagination, and the other things I mentioned, hopefully you can implement these in your practice sessions, and hopefully this will help you break through your barriers and practice more effectively.